good afternoon. Welcome to the GBA Blockchain Week. My name is Charles Dossi from ConsenSys, and I'm really delighted today to be joined by three leaders in the CBDC world, namely Tanvi, David, and Oriol. We're going to talk about the impact of CBDCs. Of course, the elephant of the room is the Chinese CBDCs, ECNY, previously called DCEP, and share some of our insights in this ever moving topic. So I'm really delighted to have you all. Maybe Tanvi, if we can start with a short introduction from you, followed by David and Oriol, that would be fantastic before we kick off the conversation. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, Charles. Very happy to be here in this interesting conversation. So I am the founder and CEO of Policy 4.0, which is a research and advisory body working in the space of digital assets, CBDC, cryptocurrency regulation, and related issues. And we came out last year with a very comprehensive series of reports on the Chinese digital yuan, and we had reverse engineered the digital yuan system and figured out its major competencies. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Excellent. David, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles. It's a great honor to be here with the esteemed panel and you chairing it. And I'd like to thank the organizer for having us here. I'm a professor in Singapore University of Social Sciences, as well as Shanghai University of Finance and Economics, and I'm also the chairman of the Global FinTech Institute. My area of research is FinTech and blockchain and CBDCs. CBDC is just under one of the topics that I'm very interested in. So I'm very glad to be able to share some of my findings today.
Thank you, David. And Oriol, please tell us more about your background and what keeps you busy also with CBDCs nowadays.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me in this amazing event. Well, as you said, my name is Oriol Caudevilla, and I'm working as a fintech advisor for a number of fintech companies in Hong Kong, as well as the UK. And I'm also doing extensive research on this CBDC topic, which is a topic that I find very current and fascinating. Aside from my advisory for fintech companies, I'm also member of the Hong Kong and Singapore Fintech Associations, also of the Digital Euro Association, as well as fellow at the Qatar University and the Singapore University of Social Sciences, under David's supervision.
Excellent. And I take the opportunity to introduce myself also. So my name is Charles Dossi. I'm the Managing Director for Asia Pacific at ConsenSys. So I work together with a team of ConsenSys out of Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and Japan. We've been very active in the topic of CBDCs, namely with our engagement with the Bank of Thailand on retail CBDCs, Reserve Bank of Australia in CBDCs for syndicated loans, and we are also actively building together with the HKMA a cross-border CBDC platform, which was renamed lately by the BIS as a MCBDC bridge, as there is a growing number of participants in this platform. Before we get started, let's be cautious of the audience, and with this topic ever changing, may I ask three of you to define CBDCs in let's say in 30 seconds, because a CBDC out of Singapore, a CBDC out of Hong Kong, a CBDC out of India and beyond with you, Tanvi, it's a topic which is ever changing, and the definitions, I would say, is refining itself. And I would love to have you clarify and maybe share your views on what is a CBDC today, and how could you explain it to a layman person?
Yeah, I think this is actually sounds like a very easy question, but it's quite difficult because I think the architecture of CBDCs is evolving continuously. So there are, of course, economic discussions, definitions which have to do with whether it's a liability of the central bank or not. But I would say from an innovation perspective, which is, our focus is the new generation technologies, right? I think from that perspective, I would say CBDCs are the next generation of fiat money. Like they are going to redefine the functions and the capabilities of sovereign money. And that comes about with a variety of features that have never existed in money before, whether it's programmability or it's customization, or it's going to change the very nature of economics, in my opinion. So they are, in a way, a sort of tidal wave of innovation.
Excellent. David, from Singapore. Singapore has been really active on this topic from the early days, and you are at the forefront of this innovation. How do you see the CBDC from a Singapore perspective, but also with your engagement in the Shanghai scene?
Yes, I think it's a very interesting time. And your first earlier question about the definition, there are so many definitions. And I try to look at it in a very different way. And perhaps from here in Singapore, from a university, we look at it. We are looking into two broad types of CBDC. One type is actually the central bank issued digital currency, which is the liability of the central bank on the balance sheet in the accounting system. Then this is what Singapore has been working on the project Ubin, and the purpose is to try to do a lot of payments versus payments and payments versus delivery. And the other type that I try to look into is the central bank approved digital currency. So that is very much more like the ECNY or the DCEP, and also Project Bakun, where it is really not the liability of the central bank on the balance sheet, but it is approved by the central bank and initiated by the central bank. And I suppose there are a lot of confusion on that. Hopefully, by looking at it as central bank issue and central bank approved digital currency, we can have a clearer idea. And from the Singapore perspective, as I mentioned earlier on, it is very much like what the Ambridge project that we are looking into, not only just on payments versus payment, but I think there will be a lot of interest in delivery of digital assets versus the payment, so that the whole idea is to lower the counterparty risk, or hopefully you can get rid of the whole counterparty risk, like in the case of CBA, central bank approved. If it's not possible, perhaps where you have a settlement system that you don't require a huge liquidity pool. I think that is the kind of efficiency that we're looking into, actually from the Singapore perspective.
Excellent. That's really very useful, and I like this term of CBA, which I think is coming even more and more around us. Not only the plain vanilla CBDC, but some products around the CBDC concept, but not originally issued by central banks, and that's something which I think will come in between the stable coin and CBDCs, maybe. Is that where they sit? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that is an interesting part, because you have the CBA, I call it CBA, which is usually 100% backed by some fiat currency. In the case of Cambodia, either US dollar or the riel. And that actually takes a lot of issues about having resources to ensure that the settlement risk is reduced, and that you have to ensure that the counterparty risk is very low. In that case, where it's fully backed, you don't have to worry as much as in the case of the CBI, which is central bank issued digital currency.
Excellent. Oriol, out of the work you're doing with fintech companies, do you feel these companies are ready for CBDCs? I talked to a group of VCs a few months ago, and they reached out very worried, thinking that some of their fintech startups were focusing on cross-border payment and other type of payment activities, and they were essentially really scared by CBDCs, thinking that there will be a wave of troubles coming to some fintechs where their value proposition could be potentially replaced by CBDCs. Do you have a similar sentiment? Or do you feel the fintech will leverage CBDCs, or they might be actually challenged by the CBDCs?
I think eventually they will leverage CBDCs for sure. I mean, for example, many people in China thought that, this digital yuan was going to replace somehow those payment app platforms like WeChat Pay or Alipay, and now it looks like China is going to cooperate. The digital yuan is going to be integrated within those platforms, which show us that there is room for like CBDCs and fintech firms to cooperate, to work together. There is some concern now, though. I mean, you're right about that. The concerns exist, they are there, but I think it's also because there is like a there are so many misconceptions about CBDCs out there in the market, especially even in the media. When you see the media, you see so many people like confusing CBDCs with privately issued cryptocurrencies. You see so many mistakes in that area that it makes people more worried about CBDCs than they should be. So of course it's going to be challenging, and there is this concern that you mentioned. But I think that eventually fintech firms are going to find a way to leverage the opportunities offered by CBDCs and work together.
Excellent. Tanvi, you've been very early documenting very diligently the DCEP project before it got renamed into ECNY. And David, you also surely have your views and your experience on it. What should the audience kind of remember and get out of the ECNY? Is it a CBDC like many others, but just in advance in terms of progress? Is it something which we can inspire from? And what can the other central banks learn from the journey the PBOC has engaged a few years ago already on CBDCs?
Yeah, I think I can go after Professor. I'm sure he, yeah.
Yeah, let me try to share some from my limited knowledge. I find it very interesting in the sense that there are two ways to look at, collectively, we can call the CBI and CBA both as CBDC for the sake of discussion. I would actually prefer to look at it as the potential of what the CBDC revolution can do, rather than looking at what we should do with the CBDC. I think it's more interesting to look at that perspective. And I think PBOC has been working on this for 4 years, 5 years now, maybe 5 years or even 6 years. Since 2014, they've been looking into it. And I think the focus is slightly different from the more matured market in Asia and in China. Besides looking at the efficiency of payment, they're also looking at the financial inclusion perspective. So you could see that DCEP has actually a few, if you look at many of the speeches, DCEP has few products, of which ECNY is one. And it's very interesting that they start off with DCEP because they split the function of digital currency from electronic payments, but knowing that they are both complementary to each other. So there are many permutation and combination, and a lot of confusion is because not only on the CBDC architecture and design, you can have a lot of layering and design thinking behind it, but when you talk about electronic payments, it's also very confusing. So I think one thing that we learn about this is that instead of looking at all the classification, we focus on what's the potential of the ECNY is trying to do. What is PBOC trying to do? I think what they are trying to do, from my perspective, I can see that number one, they will continue the financial inclusion perspective. Number two, of course, to be more efficient payment system that they may have. But I would like to redefine financial inclusion, because normally we talk about financial inclusion, it's always about serving the underserved customers or the citizens. But from this PBOC and Bakun project, I think we learned something as well. Financial inclusion should be broader. Financial inclusion should include collaboration between incumbents as well as payments companies and other retail companies. So in the second layer design of PBOC, it's a real financial inclusion, not only to bring more retail into the usage, but they also open up the entire POS of new payments company and retail companies joining. And initially, they were talking about even McDonald's, Coffee Bean or other retails that are coming to join. But you can also see from Bakum project that, it's so much cheaper and so much low cost for anyone to come on board onto the new payment system. Yeah. And I think that is the revolution that we are looking into, in the sense that instead of a two or three party settlement or clearing system that we have, to add on another one to a WeChat or to Alipay, you got to go onto their system. But now with, previously called DCEP or the Bakum project, everybody can just be a new nodes that come in. So the cost of joining the new payment system is actually lower to a certain level, besides lowering the counterparty risk because of the CBA. So I think that is something very interesting and the lesson for all of us when we're looking at the design of CBDC.
Thank you so much, David. Do you think Tanvi regulators in India and beyond are having this vision the Chinese seems to execute on of financial inclusion in a way that you want to include everyone from SMEs to new players and make sure your market becomes essentially better distributed and more healthy?
I think that sort of a thought process is definitely powering the move to CBDCs. And I would also say on the Chinese experiment, I mean, one thing that still stands out in the ECNY compared to all the other CBDCs till now is the programmability aspect, right? So that is so extensive in the architecture of the ECNY, and it's not clear when they will activate what, but the functionalities are there. And that essentially has enabled in terms of strategic outcomes from this, right? It's very much gearing China up for a new sort of data economy, right, that we are entering, where data is an asset and data can get monetized in different ways, whether it's individual data or it's machine to machine data, or that whole landscape of things was never properly captured on by fiat money. And I think that is, in my mind, one of the most disruptive aspects of the ECNY's architecture. Is it's sort of really going to leapfrog China into a very futuristic sort of economy, right? Which it already is, but that it would be to a level where many other countries are not even prepared with the baselines.
Oriol, maybe have you seen here in the Greater Bay Area, or GBA for the audience, which is not the local audience? Have you seen some actions on the blockchain ecosystem, kind of signaling some upcoming use cases and implementation of CBDCs in between Hong Kong, the mainland, and Macau?
Well, yes. I mean, actually, I have. I mean, it's not only applicable to the GBA actually, because we saw China, for example, in January publishing that report on the BSN, the Blockchain Service Network. I think that report was published on January 16. It's a platform which is going to support multiple CBDCs, including, I guess, even though they didn't specify that specifically, the digital yuan. And even in the GBA, we're seeing many movements in that area, because, I mean, we're going there. And I just wanted to make some remark about what you were speaking now about financial inclusion. And I must say, I completely agree with all of you, of course. Even though, I mean, to me, I feel like China's main rationale behind DCEP, I may be wrong, of course, but to me, is mostly when it comes to trying to promote cross-border payments. Because, I mean, if we look at China's latest movements, we see, for example, that, the People's Bank of China teaming up with SWIFT, also China signing the RCEP, which created this huge free trade area. All these movements are actually showing us that China may, of course, be very interested in promoting financial inclusion. I'm not saying it doesn't, but at the same time, I also feel like they want to do more. No? They want to try to promote the RMB for cross-border payments. And in that sense, Hong Kong is going to play a vital role because Hong Kong, being a special administrative region, being able to provide the digital yuan with its first tests for cross-border payments, is going to leverage his position very well. So I think that's in that sense, I'm very excited about seeing how the tests in Hong Kong are going to go, which are supposed to start very soon, because as far as I know, the technical preparations were being finished. So I think it's going to be in there in Hong Kong where we are going to see how the digital yuan is going to be powerful, to its like higher extent.
And do you foresee the actual setup on the Chinese renminbi to remain onshore and offshore, having two different types of renminbi, essentially, the CNY and CNH? Do you think that moving into the CBDC age, China will, or maybe should, if we don't have the information yet, kind of merge these two domestic currencies and overseas currencies into one?
Yes, that's actually the problem, because China is like creating the technology, but there's like still one big elephant in the room, one big issue, which is like the fact that the yuan is still like a non-convertible currency. So that's still the main issue. But I mean, it's hard to say, it's hard to foresee, but I would say that initially China is going to manage to convert some of the US dollar denominated international trade transactions into RMB denominated ones. That's for sure. But I mean, when it comes to trying to actually challenge the US dollar, it's going to take a while, because until the RMB doesn't become like fully convertible, that issue is going to remain there, CBDC or no CBDC. But I think that it's going to be like a slow process. It's going to take like baby steps, but I mean, it's clear that it's China's intention when we look at the whole picture. So I would say that eventually we may be arriving in that situation where like there is no distinction between onshore and offshore, but it's going to take a few years.
Yeah, I would actually add to that. I agree with Oriol that I think the convertibility debate is much bigger than the CBDC per se, right? Because even if you look economically with CBDC circulating offshore, for example, I mean, even if they put quotas on it, right, to sort of limit the circulation and manage the monetary policy around it, then again you will have these arbitrage kind of markets that will open up between CNH and CBDC offshore, right? So it is not an easy thing to solve, and I agree with Oriol. It's going to be a much larger monetary policy discussion. I think all the DCEP can do is give the PBOC traceability on offshore CNY. But even that, it will not do anything to affect the supply demand of that, right? Because there are parties that will not perhaps agree to use this sort of a CBDC, which has privacy concerns or things like that, right? So I don't see that problem getting solved very easily with PBOC.
True. Just let me make one final remark. That's true. I fully agree with you. Actually, the only thing though that I wanted to say before finishing is that it's true that it's not going to happen like overnight, but at the same time, I feel like if we see so many countries being worried about China being so advanced, it means that there is something in there now. I mean, for example, the US, they didn't want to start doing research on their US dollar anytime before, but now they seem to have changed their minds. And the same applies to many other countries. Even Japan and Korea, they are like willing to start their own CBDC tests much sooner than expected. So this is a clear proof that that China is getting somewhere.
Yeah, I just want to add that it's interesting to observe that the DCEP or the ECNY is using the unspent transaction output. So which means that every single transaction can be traced and tracked. And I think that's interesting, even though it's a two-layer technology where the second layer can be more decentralized. But if you look at the past history, China has always very concerned about renminbi being traded offshore, and therefore they have the bilateral swap agreement with many countries. But with the UTXO, I think if they can trace and track, and instead of having a pool for CNH, now everything is programmable and controlled by an e-wallet. So the way to manage the monetary policy has moved from managing a pool of money through the UTXO and programmable money. You can actually now manage the private key as well as private key management, and as well as the fact that you can have some sort of standards for the wallet locally versus international wallet. So that will actually resolve some of the issues, because being programmable has a lot of advantage in that sense that they do have more control. Of course, in that case, we have to give out something else, which I think we need to think deeper about the privacy issue.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. David, I'd like to stay with you for a minute. You mentioned the CBDCs and the CBAs, central banks authorized currencies, which maybe some other people are calling stable coins. And I foresee a lot of competition upcoming between CBDCs and stablecoin. Should they be authorized? Should they be non-authorized? But there is this competition. It started probably with the Facebook announcement a few years ago, but there is a lot of work being made by various commercial banks also. And I'm wondering if one day I will be offered maybe a Hong Kong dollar coming from the HKMA, but maybe also I will be offered or get access to a Hong Kong dollar issued by a Hong Kong registered company with the right license. And I'd love to kind of debate with three of you on this phenomenon which is coming our way, a competition between the official currencies and the private currencies. Is it something real? And what are the best advice we could give to either central banks, remaining as humble as we should, but also to private entities, because I think there is something happening here, and some people will probably be disappointed or are maybe too ambitious, or maybe some others are too confident. But there is some very interesting 12 months ahead, in my opinion, in this kind of challenge or face-to-face between the original plain vanilla CBDCs and the stable coins. And David, if you'd like to start on this, I'd love to hear from you, followed by Tanvi and Oriol.
So the central bank approved digital currency is very interesting, because if you look into history, your own country currency can be circulating anywhere else, right? In Hong Kong currency was when it was British colony, it was also being used in Shandong, Weihai Wei, during the times where Weihai Wei in Shandong was also a colony of the British. And if you look at Hong Kong itself, you could see the British and the Spanish minted silver, originally from India, because East India Company were also being transacted in Hong Kong. So now that you see Bakun project, where you have US dollar and also Rio, and Bakun project is working with Maybank to work with the foreign workers in Malaysia to do cross-border remittances. So it's opened up the entire field now that it is a wallet game. The wallet can be anywhere because it follows your handphone or any other hardware wallet that you may have. So it can be traded anywhere else as long as people are willing to use it. So that is the part of the CBA that we're talking about. Then sometimes we call it synthetic or whatever, but then there's another part that you mentioned about, like Diam or USDT or USDC, which is very interesting too, because if you are trading crypto, you don't need a US bank. You actually can hold a USDT and USDC if you trust the corporate that they do have the reserve there, unlike the currency board that really is there, but you have to trust the corporate that it's there. But if the trust is being established for the private company, again, that will have the same impact as we have seen back in history, that they are like just minted silver with a hardware wallet. You can be anywhere trading that. So I think central banks who are not looking into this, they really have to look into the potential. It's not that whether you should do it or not, and we are not saying that what's the best design. As I started earlier to say, that we are looking at the potential the potential of what this technology could do and let your imagination flow. And then when your imagination flow, you can begin to realize that perhaps we are into digital barter, because China could just digitize their oil, digitize their products, they could tokenize everything that they have and start trading without any other currency except with ECNY or any currency that people wish to use. So if you allow your imagination to flow and look at the potential rather than looking at the existing market structure that you have and look at the efficiency, then you probably will see where the future is going.
Yeah, I think that's very well put by Professor Lee. I think when we think of the stablecoin versus CBDC debate, I think it's a bigger debate than we are thinking, right? Because I think it becomes in some places almost a philosophical debate, right? Of what is money, and like Dr. Lee was saying, of course there are these I'm guessing with the CBACs you mean the SCBDC concept, right? Where they are they are public-private partnership sort of issuance of money. Those are, of course, a somewhat more acceptable model, right? But if you take something like, for example, take Tether, even before it was backed properly, right, by reserves, there has been action on it, from the regulators, but because the market is so accepting of it, right? Like the market is so accepting of the stable coin. It at some point even stopped mattering whether it was backed or it was not, or whether it had fiat linkages or it did not, right? And I think that sort of throws up much bigger questions of, money is, they are going to be perhaps these kind of social movements around money, right? Like when it's accepted by a network, then it becomes money. It doesn't matter if it's seashells or it's, it's Tether or it's, a sovereign currency. And I think that's probably, as a policy analyst, like that's probably the most interesting dynamic around this debate for me, is what gets accepted by the people at the end of the day.
It looks like with a trustless technology, we are all looking for new kind of trust or new kind of trust anchors. And for me, it's fascinating to deploy technology which is able to build trust between so many different organizations and people, and kind of re-energizing and challenging a little bit all the models the society and ourselves have in mind, and exploring these kind of new ways of trusting either an asset or trusting an organization via this technology. So it's certainly, I think, a very deep impact in our organization, and it's to me fascinating to see how we are able to reinvent trust. Oriol, you have some thoughts on this hard question: CBDCs versus stablecoins?
Yes, sure. Well, actually, I agree with what David and Tanvi just said. I think that generally speaking, we need to look at this like we look at the whole picture. I mean, we are seeing this digital ecosystem being born, so we shouldn't be thinking that they are each element of this ecosystem is excludes the other one. I mean, because we should be looking at them as complementary elements. So I'm going to go even further. No, I mean, not only when we talk about stable, but when we talk about any other kind of cryptocurrency, it's quite common for people to say that CBDCs may be there to replace privately issued cryptocurrencies and these kind of ideas. But it's hard to say, because I mean, it's possible for countries, for example, like China, to adopt a tough stance towards cryptos while promoting its own CBDC. That's true, but it's also possible for other countries, to promote its own CBDC while not being so tough on cryptocurrencies. So the whole thing here is that we are starting to see people evolving towards this much more digital world and this much more digital means of payment. So I think we need to see at all these elements as part of an ecosystem. I don't think that just because we have a digital euro or digital rupee in the future or whatever, stable coins and cryptos are not going to be there. I think that each element of this ecosystem is like the answer to a different need or realities. So I think it's possible for those elements to coexist perfectly well.
I will close this very lively conversation by asking you one question each, and please just take 1 minute for it. And the question is what would be the feature you expect to see, which you are the most excited to see whenever CBDCs will reach your wallet? And you can give a little bit, a few minutes to think about it. And maybe I can start with this and trying to explain. We are all professionals of CBDCs or heavily involved in it, so we have a good understanding of what is being built right now. And I would like the audience to kind of to close this conversation, get something more concrete and inspire them and make them dream by understanding from each of you what kind of features is coming in our wallets and why you are excited about. And I'll start, and I hope I will not steal the idea from Tanvi or any of you. I'm very excited about programmable money. And if I can receive money from maybe my boss, maybe I get my salary, plus I get an extra bonus to get outdoor activities. And this money can only be spent into shops which are related to outdoor activities. I feel there will be, for my company and for me as also a leader within my company, a way to incentivize in good ways the life and start to share and get this new experience with money of directional money and programmable money. So I'm super excited, and my bet is that this is coming faster than we think, and this will be almost invisible. And probably people will get confused with a programmable CBDC and a coupon, because eventually the value proposition is fairly close. And I believe at least this is what we are trying to do at ConsenSys, is to make sure that when we build this cutting edge technology, we make sure it's essentially blendable in a very smooth and elegant way with the existing digital life we have, and coming as an extra feature rather than a total new paradigm shift. But maybe Tanvi, you have also something you're dreaming about when the first CBDC will reach your mobile phone.
Yeah, I think, see, I'm myself a big supporter of programmability, and I think like all these directional usages and, moving to a more behavioral management system, in economics, like that's going to be a huge transformation. I think that's the thing I'm most excited about myself. I also think something that I do look forward to also from a policy perspective is just how networks of money will start governing themselves, because I think that's the plane where there will start being competition to states and sovereign states. Like if they can manage that very effectively, right, like a network governance sort of model, I think that will throw up some real futuristic kind of next generation challenges for governments.
David.
Yeah. So I think we all would see a secure, efficient payment system going forward with the right kind of CBDC to serve the people and the corporates, so that everybody can come together to have a sustainable growth. But along the way, you will find that the word programmable is the most important, which means that it doesn't matter whether you have 1 layer, 2 layer, or 3 layer CBDC design. Somewhere along the line, you will see that the mass adoption will come from when you have a lot of users using smart contracts and distributed ledger. You may have a combination of private, centralized, or distributed ledger, but that you will probably see a lot of smart contracts being used. You'll probably see that there will be a lot of new third-party trust, because it's not possible to get rid of all third-party trust. So there will a lot of new form of third-party trust will emerge. So I think it's a very exciting time with a lot of potential with programmable money and smart contracts.
Thank you, David. Oriol.
Yes, sure. To me, like the most exciting features is first of all what you mentioned about being programmable. But aside from that, I'm very excited about the idea of offline payment support. This offline idea is actually very exciting to me. And also the idea that you don't necessarily need a bank account to use CBDCs. That's very important as well when it comes to financial inclusion, especially in those, let's say, remote towns where people may have access to a smartphone or laptop, but not to a physical bank branch. So in that sense, I think the implications for financial inclusion might be huge. And aside from that, just to finish, I'm also excited about what actually CBDCs may imply for monetary policy purposes. Like, for example, China has been struggling with shadow banking, for example, for decades. So being capable of creating such a digital tool that's going to allow to solve so many issues at the same time is actually fascinating.
Tanvi, David, Oriol, thank you very much for these inputs. It has been a pleasure. I wish we could have more time, and I look forward to meet you again in person whenever we can travel again. These virtual events are fantastic. I'd like to thank, of course, NextChange for organizing and hosting us today. The program continues on the GBA Blockchain Week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.